Excellent, folks. Buckle up, because we're about to dive into the history of one of the most fateful, brilliant, and controversial inventions in human history. This is not just a story about iron and gunpowder. This is a story about dreams, betrayal, money, war, and how one non-professional turned battlefields, and indeed the entire world order, upside down. If you think you know everything about the Maxim, you're mistaken. Right here, in this text, will be facts not written in textbooks and connections that will send shivers down your spine. I promise it'll be intense. Be sure to read to the end. In the finale, I'll have a question for you that will determine the next portion of such investigations. Don't miss it, and write your thoughts in the comments. Every one of them is important to me. Part 1. The shoulder blow that changed the world. Imagine a hot day somewhere in Savannah, Georgia, the year 1866. On the shooting range stands a man in his mid-20s, rubbing his numb shoulder. He has just fired several shots from a Springfield, the standard rifle of the U.S. Army, and each time the butt painfully kicked his shoulder. This was recoil, simple, brutal physics that everyone had resigned themselves to, from the private soldier to the general. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction, as Sir Isaac Newton formulated. Accept it and endure. But this man was not one to simply endure. His name was Hiram Stevens Maxim, and at that moment, rubbing his bruise, he asked himself a question that had probably occurred to others, but only he had the audacity and stubbornness to seek an answer. What if I could make this devilish recoil work for me, not just dampen it, but use it for something useful? For example, to automatically reload the weapon for the next shot. It's important to understand who Maxim was at that moment. He was not a gunsmith. He had no specialized education. He was an electrician, and not just a hobbyist, but one of the main rivals of Thomas Edison himself in the War of Currents and the struggle for America's electric lighting market. His mind was tuned to seek efficient solutions to harness energy. He saw the world as a set of forces that could be tamed, redirected, and put to service. And this wild, wasteful energy of recoil, which simply translated into useless pain in the shoulder, seemed like a challenge to him. But he didn't rush to the workshop. The idea, as usual, was shelved. In 1873, he sketched a few designs for an automatic rifle and set it aside again. Why? Because his real, passion-filled world was the world of wires, dynamos, light bulbs, and patent courts. Electricity, that was his passion and his battle. Only after losing this war, being effectively squeezed out by powerful competitors, and, according to rumors, receiving a substantial settlement on condition of staying out of electrical engineering in the States, did Maxim leave for Europe in 1881. Bitter with money, but without his life's main work. And here, in England, thoughts of weapons flooded back to him. According to some accounts, he learned that a certain Austrian engineer, Ferdinand Mannlicher, was also working on something similar. The inventor's excitement, mixed with a desire to prove to the whole world, and especially to America, what he was still capable of, flared up in him with new force. Rumors began to circulate that the American was deliberately creating an infernal machine so that Europeans would kill each other, as revenge for his defeat. This is a beautiful but cynical conspiracy theory. Maxim, judging by the memoirs, was a rather good-natured and practical man. He saw not revenge, but an opportunity, a new market, a new chance at greatness. Part 2. Deep economic and historical context. Why the world was ready for the Maxim. To understand the phenomenon of the machine gun, one must look beyond the inventor's workshop. The late 19th century was the era of the Second Industrial Revolution. Assembly lines, steel, chemistry, precision engineering. The world learned to mass-produce enormous quantities of everything: goods, locomotives, ships, and cartridges. Without established mass production of unitary cartridges, case, primer, powder, bullet in one unit, the Maxim machine gun would have been just an expensive toy. Industry had matured enough to feed this voracious machine. It was at this precise moment that imperialism reached its peak. The British Empire, upon which the sun never set, France, Belgium, Germany, all the great powers were rushing to divide Africa, Asia, and Oceania. Colonial wars became routine, but waging them the old way, deploying linear volley-fire platoons against numerous, albeit poorly armed, native armies, was expensive and inefficient. A force multiplier was needed. A small number of white soldiers had to have overwhelming, crushing superiority over crowds of enemies. Accuracy wasn't needed. What was needed was to create a wall of lead, a kinetic barrier that nothing living could overcome. But military leadership on both sides of the Atlantic was conservative. When Maxim offered his brainchild first to the USA and then to Great Britain, he was met with skepticism. Generals in gold braid spoke of wasteful expenditure of ammunition, that a soldier must shoot seldom, but accurately. They saw the machine gun as an expensive curiosity, not a new paradigm of warfare. They needed a graphic, bloody lesson. Such a lesson occurred in 1893 in Africa, in Matabeleland, modern Zimbabwe. The Ndebele and Shona peoples rose up against the British colonial company of Cecil Rhodes. And here, on the Shangani River, a detachment of 50 men with 4 Maxim machine guns engaged several thousand warriors. The outcome was monstrous and unambiguous. Thousands of dead Africans against a handful of wounded British. It was not a battle, it was a massacre. From that day on, the world was forever changed. Financiers and generals saw the light. The legendary banker Nathan Rothschild, whose capital was closely tied to colonial enterprises, helped finance the Maxim Gun Company. Investment poured in. The machine gun became not just a weapon, but a tool of geopolitics and business. Part 3: Anatomy of a Legend. Why the Maxim is engineering poetry. Let's break down how it worked in simple terms. Maxim's genius lay in the simplicity and efficiency of the core idea. Short barrel recoil. When fired, the powder gases push not only the bullet forward but also the barrel backward, just a few centimeters. Clever lock. The barrel was rigidly coupled to the bolt by a special system of locking lugs. Recoiling, it pulled the bolt with it. Energy transformation. Then, levers and springs came into play. A recoil spring, like the one in a car door, compressed, storing the energy of the recoil. Automatic cycle. After the barrel stopped, the compressed spring forcefully pushed the entire mechanism back. The bolt, in doing so, grabbed a new cartridge from the canvas belt, fed it into the barrel, and at the end of the stroke, the lugs rigidly locked the barrel and bolt together again. Everything was ready for the next shot. The shooter only held the trigger. But there was a problem: overheating. At such a rate of fire, from 450 to 600 rounds per minute, the barrel would glow red-hot in minutes. And here Maxim shone with another simple and brilliant idea: the water cooling jacket. A thick steel jacket around the barrel, filled with water, about 4 liters. The water drew away heat, preventing the barrel from melting. This created the iconic, unmistakable image of the machine gun with that barrel-shaped jacket. Yes, the water would boil after 200 or 300 rounds, steam exiting through a tube into a special container, and in the Russian army, they even figured out later how to pack snow into the jacket, which became a lifesaver in the Finnish frosts. But the system worked. It allowed for sustained, continuous fire. This weight, however, was its Achilles heel. The gun itself weighed almost 27 kilograms. The mount, in the Russian army, it was the famous wheeled mount of the Sokolov system, another 44. Plus water, plus a box with a 250-round belt, close to 70 kilograms. This was not a rifle. It was a stationary firing point. It was carried by a crew. It was mounted on horse-drawn carts, tachankas, during the Civil War, but you couldn't run with it in an attack. Part 4: The Maxim in Russia. A friend among strangers, a stranger among friends. The history of the Maxim in Russia is a separate drama. The Tsarist government bought a license, and from 1905, it began production at the Tula Arms plant. Our engineers, savvy people, immediately began improving it. They simplified some parts, adapted it for our 3-line 7.62 by 54 millimeters our cartridge, and most importantly, created the Sokolov mount. Wheeled like a small cannon with a large armored shield. It became as much a symbol as the machine gun itself. The Maxim went through all the cataclysms of the early 20th century. The Russo-Japanese War, the First World War, the Civil War. It was the weapon of both the Reds and the Whites and the Greens. It was mounted on tachankas, creating a prototype of mobile fire groups. It became a people's weapon, a symbol of both horror and power. In the Great Patriotic War, it, already morally obsolete, was still in service, especially at the beginning, when the grandfather veterans of 41 fought to the death, pouring fire into German lines. Its production in the USSR was finally phased out only in 1945, but it wasn't scrapped. And here begins the darkest and most intriguing part of the story. Why do Maxims still surface in conflicts today? In Ukraine, Syria, Africa? The answer lies in its wild, beastly reliability and simplicity. The steel is thick, the mechanism proven by billions of rounds. Can be dug up in an abandoned warehouse, cleaned of cosmoline, water poured into the jacket, and it will fire. It doesn't need microchips or complex training. It forgives a lack of perfect maintenance. Yes, it loses to modern Pecheneg and UDOs in weight, mobility, rate of fire. But in positional defense, when you need to fortify and hold a sector under dense, unceasing fire, this grandfather can still show its character. Its use today is a cry of despair, a sign of a total lack of resources, but also a terrible testament to the fact that some things created for killing do not age. Part 5. The Man Behind the Legend. Not just a machine gun. And what of Sir Hiram Maxim himself? Becoming a knight of the British Empire, he remained an indefatigable inventor until the end of his days. His mind knew no rest. Besides the machine gun, he designed flying machines. His giant steam-powered airplane even made a short hop, invented a new type of mousetrap, created an inhaler for asthmatics, and, ironically, received one of the first patents for a firearm silencer, a device intended to reduce the sound of a shot, while his main brainchild multiplied that sound by hundreds. This is the contradictory nature of the era and the individual. The same mind that sought to alleviate the suffering of asthma patients created the most effective instrument of mass destruction of its time. Progress has no morality. It simply provides power. And how to wield it is decided by people, politicians, generals, bankers. So who was Hiram Maxim? A genius inventor ahead of his time? A businessman who successfully monetized the zeitgeist? A tool in the hands of colonizers? He became all of these. His story is a lesson in how personal grievance, technical thought, political demand, and financial interest intertwine into a tight knot capable of plowing through history. He made recoil work for reloading, and in doing so, made the entire military-political machine of imperialism work for him. The Maxim machine gun is not an artifact. It is an archetype, the first harbinger of the era of automatic weapons, a machine that reduced human life to a statistical unit in the equations of military science. Look at any modern rapid-fire system. In its DNA is forever encoded the principle that was conceived by an American electrician, rubbing his bruised shoulder on a foreign land. Friends, this was not just a story. This was an immersion into the very essence of technological progress, which always has a dark side. If such deep dives resonate with you, let me know. Write in the comments, what other legendary weapon or invention with a complex fate would you like me to research in such detail? Every topic you suggest is a potential new big story. And of course, subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories ahead that will flip your perception of familiar things. Don't miss it, because as Sir Hiram showed us, even a simple blow to the shoulder can have consequences that echo for centuries. Write, argue, suggest. Until next time in the epicenter of history.